My husband brought home a souvenir from his fishing trip that shattered my world into a million pieces. The irony is, I was the one who helped him pack. I'd waddled around our bedroom, my 7 months pregnant belly leading the way, pulling his worn flannel shirts from the closet and his thick wool socks from the drawer. I remember folding them neatly, the familiar, comforting scent of his laundry detergent filling my nostrils, a scent I associated with home and safety. I even tucked a new box of his favorite protein bars into the duffel bag, a silly, wifely gesture I'd replayed in my mind 1,000 times since, each memory a fresh stab of humiliation. Let me rewind. Me Chloe 30 and him Mark 34. We'd been married for 5 years, together for 7. We met in college at a library of all places. He was studying engineering, I was knee-deep in art history text. He'd asked me for help finding a book on Roman aqueducts, and I, flustered by his easy smile and the way his sweater stretched across his shoulders, had led him to the wrong section entirely. We'd laughed about it over coffee later. He was the steady, grounded counterpoint to my more flighty, creative nature. I loved that about us. I thought we balanced each other. Our life before kids was a string of lazy Sunday brunches, spontaneous road trips, and ambitious home renovation projects that we'd often abandon halfway through to order pizza and make out on the drop cloth-covered couch. He was my best friend. Or so I'd believed. We had a 4-year-old daughter, Lily, a whirlwind of golden curls and fierce opinions, and I was 7 months pregnant with our son Noah. The pregnancy with Lily had been a breeze, all glowing skin and boundless energy. This one was a trial by fire. The hyperemesis gravidarum wasn't just morning sickness. It was a relentless siege that had me retching over the toilet well into my 2nd trimester, my body convulsing long after there was nothing left to give. Then came the pelvic girdle pain, a sharp, stabbing agony that made turning over in bed a 10-minute, tear-filled ordeal. Walking felt like my pelvis was splitting in two. Mark was present but not present. He'd cook dinner sometimes, usually something simple like pasta, do the grocery run, and he never missed a prenatal appointment. He'd hold my hand while the doctor measured my ever-expanding belly, his face a mask of concerned support. But the deep hands-on nurturing, the emotional scaffolding I so desperately needed, I had to beg for it. He was always tired from his job as a project manager, always needing to decompress for an hour, which inevitably stretched into 3, with his video games or mindlessly scrolling through sports highlights on his phone. "I just need to turn my brain off, Chloe," he'd say, when I'd tentatively ask if he could give Lily her bath so I could lie down for 20 minutes without a small human climbing on me. I told myself he was a good provider, a stable rock. Our mortgage was paid, our fridge was full. I chalked up my loneliness and the simmering resentment to my own hypersensitivity, a side effect of the hormonal tsunami raging through my body. I was being needy. I needed to be stronger. The fishing trip was planned with his buddies from his gym, Jake, Mike, and Ben. A 3-day weekend up at a remote cabin by Lake Serene. "It's the last hurrah before I'm drowning in diapers again," he'd joked months ago when it was first proposed. At the time it had sounded harmless, even deserved. But now, with my due date a mere 8 weeks away, the reality was terrifying. I was enormous, uncomfortable, and Lily was deep in the throes of a defiant, boundary-testing phase. The thought of solo parenting for 3 days while being this pregnant, this physically compromised, felt like being sentenced to a mild form of torture. "Are you serious, Mark? I could go into labor early. I can barely tie my own shoes. What if something happens?" I pleaded, my voice cracking with a mixture of exhaustion and panic. I was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter for support while he packed a cooler with beers. "Chloe, it's just 3 days. It's been on the calendar for 6 months. My mom said she'll come help you. You'll be fine. I need this break, babe." Work has been insane, he said, not looking up from his phone where he was, I was sure, checking the weather forecast for the lake. Work. You leave at 8, you're home by 5:30. I'm on 24/7 mom duty, growing a human. What break do I get? When do I get to turn my brain off? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. He finally looked at me, his expression a familiar mix of annoyance and feigned patience. It's not a competition. I'm going. It's just a guy's trip. We're going to fish, drink a few beers and play cards. It'll be boring. You'll hardly even notice I'm gone. He went. He kissed my forehead, hugged Lily tightly and drove off in his SUV, a cloud of dust trailing behind him. I stood at the window, my hand on my belly, feeling Noah perform what felt like a full gymnastics routine, and cried silent, hot tears of abandonment. His mother, Carol, came over for one afternoon. She spent most of it rearranging my kitchen cabinets, for better efficiency, and commenting on how puffy my face looked. You should really put your feet up more, dear, she'd said, while simultaneously clucking her tongue at the pile of laundry I hadn't had the energy to fold. Her help was more stressful than being alone. The nights were the worst. Lily would wake up from a nightmare and I'd have to heave myself out of bed, my pelvis screaming in protest to soothe her. I'd lie awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, the empty space beside me in the bed feeling vast and cold. When he returned, he was sun-kissed and smiling, smelling of lake water, bonfire smoke and cheap beer. He hugged me, his embrace feeling foreign and perfunctory. Missed you guys so much, he declared, swinging a giggling Lily into the air. But something was off. It was subtle, a shift in the atmosphere. He was more attached to his phone than ever, a new, almost paranoid vigilance about it. He took it with him everywhere, even for a 30-second trip to take out the trash. If I entered the room while he was scrolling, he'd subtly tilt the screen away from me or click it shut with a snap that felt unnecessarily sharp. His mood had changed too. He became short with me, impatient. The night he returned, I tried to share my anxiety about the birth, about my fear of another long labor. He cut me off with a sigh. Let's not borrow trouble, Chloe. It'll be fine. The doctors know what they're doing. The dismissal was like a door slamming in my face. A few days later, overwhelmed by a wave of hormonal despair and physical exhaustion, I broke down crying while trying to get Lily's shoes on. Instead of comforting me, he stood in the doorway, shook his head and said, "You've got to get a grip on these hormones, babe. You're going to scare Lily." The gaslighting was a slow, insidious poison. He wasn't just denying his secretive behavior. He was actively reframing my legitimate distress as female hysteria. I started to believe it. Maybe I was becoming an irrational, unstable person. Maybe this was just what pregnancy did and I was failing to handle it with the grace I was supposed to have. The crack in the facade came from an unlikely place. Instagram. It was a Tuesday morning. Lily was at preschool and I was trying to coax Noah into a less rib-cracking position inside me. A notification popped up. A direct message from a woman named Sarah. I didn't know her. Her profile picture showed her with a man who looked vaguely familiar. "Hi," the message began. "I don't know you and I'm so sorry to do this, but I think you deserve to know the truth. My boyfriend Ben was on that trip." My heart stuttered. Ben was one of Mark's gym buddies. Attached was a video. With trembling fingers I pressed play. It was taken in a crowded, noisy bar, all neon lights and sticky floors. Not a serene lakeside cabin. The camera panned and there he was. Mark. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, a bottle of whiskey dangling from one hand, his other arm wrapped tightly around a red-haired woman in a tiny, sparkly sequin dress. They weren't just dancing. They were a tangle of limbs, grinding against each other with a raw, vulgar intimacy. His face was buried in her neck, and her hands were roaming freely over his back and down to his backside. The timestamp in the corner of the video was from the second night of his fishing trip. My blood ran cold. I felt Noah kick, a sharp, painful jab, as if he felt the seismic shock of my betrayal. I couldn't breathe. The room, my safe, carefully curated home, seemed to tilt on its axis. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited, the acid burning my throat. This wasn't a drunken mistake. The video depicted a level of carnal abandon that spoke of deliberate, enthusiastic participation. I spent the rest of the day in a numb haze, going through the motions with Lily, my smile a brittle mask. I waited until she was in bed, safely asleep, and Mark was in his usual spot, sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, headphones on. The blue glow of the television lit up his face, a face I suddenly felt I no longer knew. I walked over, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stood there, a silent, pregnant specter, until he finally felt my presence and pulled one side of the headphones off his ear. "What's up, babe? You okay? You need something?" I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just held up my phone, the damning video playing on a silent, brutal loop. I watched his face transform. First, simple confusion at my interruption. Then, a dawning recognition of the scene on the screen. Then, pure, unadulterated panic. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, grayish pallor. "Chloe, where did you get that?" he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "Does it matter?" My own voice was eerily calm, a flat line over the churning chaos inside. "Is that you, Mark? Is that you on your wholesome, boring fishing trip while I was here, 7 months pregnant and unable to see my own feet, taking care of your daughter?" "It's not what it looks like," he blurted out, scrambling to his feet, the controller clattering to the floor. "We were all drunk. It was a stupid dare from the guys. Mike lost a bet, I had to dance with her. It meant nothing. A dare." My voice was dangerously low, laced with a venom I didn't know I possessed. "You expect me to believe that? What happened after the dare, Mark? After the bar? Did you take your dare back to a cheap motel room? Did you fulfill the terms of your bet?" He looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping. His silence was louder than any confession, more damning than any excuse. "Did you sleep with her?" I enunciated every word, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like a physical force. He still couldn't look at me. His head bowed even further. A barely audible, broken whisper escaped his lips. "Yes." The word hung in the air between us, toxic and suffocating. "Yes. A yes. That's all you have? You were drunk? It was a dare? It meant nothing." I was screaming now, tears I hadn't even felt starting to fall streaming down my face. "It meant everything to me. I'm carrying your child. I trusted you. I was here in pain building our family and you were off, defiling it." The argument was a nuclear explosion. He blamed the stress of my pregnancy, my emotional distance, the constant pressure from his friends to be one of the guys again. He tried to touch me, to grab my arm and make me calm down, and I recoiled as if his touch were acid. "Don't you dare touch me!" I shrieked, slapping his hand away so hard the sound echoed in the room. I spent that night on the floor of Lily's room, curled into a ball, sobbing silently into her princess rug, my hand pressed against my belly, feeling my son kick and roll, his innocent world already irrevocably tainted by his father's betrayal. The next morning, moving like an automaton, I started packing. He followed me from room to room, a pathetic shadow. He begged, he cried, he got down on his knees and promised it was a one-time catastrophic mistake, that he was a fool, that he loved me more than anything. His tears, which once would have shattered me, now just seemed theatrical. A performance to escape consequences. It was my older brother, David, who was my lifeline. I called him, my voice a raw wreck. I need to leave. No. He cheated. David, a man of few words but immense action, simply said, I'm on my way. 20 minutes later he was at my door. He took one look at my shattered face, my red-rimmed eyes, and the suitcases by the door, and he didn't say a word to Mark. He just started loading my and Lily's bags into his car. The silence from my brother, a man who usually had a joke for everything, was more damning than any lecture. Mark stood in the driveway weeping, but all I felt was a cold, hollow disgust. I buckled a confused Lily into her car seat, climbed into the passenger seat, and we drove away from the life I thought I had. The next few weeks were a blur of survival. David and his wife, Maria, moved their own lives around to make space for us in their small 2-bedroom apartment. Their guest room, with its IKEA furniture and spare blankets, became our sanctuary. Prenatal appointments were now fraught with a new, hidden anxiety. Comforting a confused Lily who kept asking for her daddy and her big girl bed broke my heart fresh every day. I cried in the shower, I cried while breastfeeding my pregnant belly, I cried until I felt desiccated, a husk of a person. I blocked Mark on everything: phone, email, social media. All communication, what little there was, went through my brother. I contacted a lawyer, a fierce woman named Brenda with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and filed for divorce. My only focus was on surviving the rest of my pregnancy, protecting my children, and building a wall between us and the man who had betrayed us. Then, about a month after I'd left, the world shattered all over again. The call came from Mark's father, Robert, a quiet, decent man who had always been kind to me. His voice was heavy, grave, stripped of its usual warmth. Chloe, it's Mark. He's very sick. He's in the hospital. He didn't want to tell you, didn't want to worry you in your condition, but you need to know. He has hepatitis B. It's acute and it's hit him hard. His liver enzymes are, well, it's serious. I sat down heavily on my brother's couch, the world swimming around me. Hepatitis B, I said. A serious, sometimes chronic, life-altering one. How? I whispered, the question redundant, the answer a lead weight in my stomach. Robert cleared his throat, the sound thick with discomfort and shame. He finally admitted it to us. That night, at the bachelor party, it wasn't just the woman from the bar, the one in the video. He and a couple of the others, Jake and Mike, they hired. He couldn't even say the word. He got it from one of them. The new layer of horror was almost too much for my mind to process. It wasn't just one drunken mistake with a random woman in a bar. It was multiple acts of betrayal. It was premeditated. It was with a sex worker. He had paid for it. The lies, the gaslighting, the sheer reckless, stupidity of it all crashed over me anew, a tsunami of disgust and fury. And the most terrifying thought of all, he had exposed me. He had come home, kissed me, hugged me, shared a bed with me, all while potentially carrying a virus that could have devastated me and our unborn son. Suddenly, the family's tone shifted from concerned to coercive. His mother, Carol, became a constant, shrill presence on my brother's phone. Chloe, he's your husband. He's terrified. He could have liver failure. He needs you now more than ever. In sickness and in health. You took a vow. How can you be so cruel? Where is your compassion? The pressure was immense, a relentless siege on my crumbling resolve. They painted me as the heartless villain, the fair-weather wife who abandoned her sick, potentially dying husband in his hour of need. They conveniently, willfully, forgot the part where he was sick because he had cheated on his pregnant wife and paid a prostitute, actions that were a direct violation of every vow he had ever taken to me. My first and only priority was my health and the health of my baby. I called my OB-GYN in a panic, explaining the situation through hysterical, gulping sobs. The clinic rushed me in for an emergency blood draw. The wait for the results was a 72-hour torture session, an agony I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Every twinge, every bout of nausea that felt different from the normal pregnancy nausea, every flush of warmth sent me into a spiral of pure terror. Had he given this to me? Had my body, already working overtime to create a life, been silently fighting an invasion? Had I, through no fault of my own, passed this on to my innocent son? The guilt and fear were paralyzing. When my phone finally rang with the clinic's number, my hand shook so badly I could barely answer. The nurse's voice was calm, professional. "Chloe, I have your results. They're negative. You are negative for hepatitis B. And your records show you completed your vaccination series as a teenager, so you have a strong antibody titer. You and your baby are fully protected." I slid off the kitchen chair and onto the floor, burying my face in my hands, weeping with a relief so profound and absolute it left me physically weak. David found me there a few minutes later, a puddle of grateful tears on his linoleum, and simply held me. Noah was safe. I was safe. That relief, that miraculous deliverance solidified my resolve into titanium. There would be no going back. No negotiation. I had my lawyer send a formal, unequivocal communication to Mark and his family. I was not returning. I was not his nurse, his comfort, or his wife. I was divorcing him. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, had been murdered by his actions, and no amount of illness could resurrect it. The backlash was predictably vicious. Carol left long, rambling voicemails on my brother's phone, her voice trembling with fury, calling me a monster, a disgrace to the title of wife and mother. Mark, from his hospital bed, sent long, self-pitying emails to my lawyer, pleading about how his life was over and I was kicking him while he was down, that my refusal to see him was killing him faster than the disease. I didn't read past the first few lines. I had no more emotional space for his victim narrative. I forwarded everything to Brenda, my pit bull lawyer. Noah was born 2 weeks later in a calm, quiet delivery room. There was no frantic husband coaching me, just the steady, supportive presence of David and Maria, and a wonderfully kind doula I'd hired. He was a healthy, beautiful boy with a shock of dark hair and a powerful cry. He was perfect. Mark was not there. He was not listed on the birth certificate yet, and my lawyer had ensured he had no legal right to be in the room. This was my fresh start, embodied in a tiny, squirming, perfect human. The divorce proceedings were brutal, as I knew they would be. Mark, now discharged from the hospital but facing a chronic condition and a lifetime of medication, and undoubtedly egged on by his mother, fought for shared custody. His lawyer argued that his illness didn't make him an unfit father and that my vindictive decision to leave him during a health crisis demonstrated a character flaw that could be detrimental to the children. My lawyer, Brenda, was magnificent. She was a calm, relentless storm in a courtroom. She presented a meticulous timeline of his deceit, the video evidence, the specific circumstances of how he contracted a serious STI from a sex worker, his history of emotional neglect during my pregnancy, and most damningly the fact that he had knowingly endangered the health of his pregnant wife and unborn child through his reckless actions. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, saw through the charade. She granted me full physical custody. Mark was granted supervised visitation with Lily at a designated family center, for 2 hours every other weekend. Visitation with Noah would be considered once he was older, contingent on Mark providing proof he was adhering to his medical treatment and was not a physical risk to an infant. Financially, it was a fight. They argued that his future medical bills would be significant and that his earning capacity might be impacted, so he shouldn't be burdened with high child support. The judge, thankfully, was having none of it. She noted, in a tone that could freeze water, that his medical condition was a direct and foreseeable result of his own misconduct and infidelity, and that he had been gainfully employed at the time he chose to blow up his family. The settlement was adequate, not generous, but it was enough for me to find a small, clean 2-bedroom apartment and start over. That was 2 years ago. Today, Lily is a vibrant, whip-smart 6-year-old who loves kindergarten and has a collection of stuffed owls. She sees her dad occasionally at the visitation center. She comes home sometimes quiet and pensive, but mostly she's a happy, resilient kid who is thriving in the stable, predictable routine I've built for us. Noah is a rambunctious, sunny-natured toddler who has never known a life with his father in it. He is joyful, secure, and obsessed with anything that has wheels. I heard through the reluctant grapevine of a mutual acquaintance that Mark's health has stabilized with medication, but the hepatitis B is chronic. He will live with it and the associated stigma and health monitoring for the rest of his life. He lost his job, officially due to performance issues and excessive sick leave, but we all knew the real reason. His friends from the gym have mostly deserted him. The bro code apparently doesn't extend to covering for a guy who brought back a lifelong souvenir from a hooker. He lives with his parents. His life has become a small, shrunken thing, a monument to the consequences of his own actions. As for me, the sharp, gut-wrenching anger has subsided, replaced by a quiet, steady acknowledgement of what happened. I'm not the same woman I was. The naive, trusting girl who folded flannel shirts with so much love is gone. In her place is a stronger, more resilient person, a woman who learned the hard way that the foundation of her life was built on sand. I work part-time from home doing graphic design. I'm taking online courses to get my real estate license, and my world revolves with fierce and protective love around my 2 children. Our life is small, but it is peaceful. It is filled with bedtime stories, trips to the playground, dance parties in the living room, and a profound, hard-won sense of safety. The door on that chapter of my life is firmly, irrevocably closed, the lock bolted shut. I look at my children, healthy, happy, and loved, and I know with every fiber of my being that I made the only choice I could live with. I chose us. And we, against all odds, are finally, blessedly, more than okay. We are whole.